You're listening to Lucid Cafe. I'm your host, Wendy Halley. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Lucid Cafe, a podcast exploring healing, consciousness, and the complexities of being human. My guest, Lisa Tahir, is a licensed clinical social worker in New Orleans and Los Angeles. She's the founder of Astrology and the host of the popular weekly podcast, All Things Therapy. In this episode, we discuss her new book, The Chiron Effect, Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self-Forgiveness. Please enjoy my conversation with Lisa Tahir. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Wendy, thank you so much for having me on.
So you have a book out. It's called The Chiron Effect, Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self-Forgiveness.
That is correct.
I would love to hear about how you came to write this book. My understanding is you're a psychotherapist.
So I came to being a therapist when I knew as a young person in college that I had some emotional wounds related to the way I grew up in a family where there was some abuse and trauma. And I wanted to address it because I saw people around me living their lives, though successful in many areas and aspects, emotionally really being stunted. And I didn't want that for myself. So at 21, I started therapy and I really fell in love with the process of healing, of being self-reflective, of learning that I can actually learn skills to regulate my emotions and learn the skill of containment even, that though I might be upset about something, it doesn't have to take over for such a long time like it had before and permeate everyone and everything in a negative way. And that's when I really knew this is what I'm going to do with my life. And ironically, my parents years later found a note that I scribbled around the age of 5 that said, I want to be a psychiatrist. So I know I am living my purpose as a healer, as a therapist. And I see your face. That might be weird. How does a 5-year-old know about a psychiatrist?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, unless you were watching the Peanuts, Lucy.
I was watching the Peanuts. And I grew up in a very medical family. My father is a physician. My mother is a psychiatric nurse. So I grew up with terms like psychiatrist, psychologist thrown around, just hearing them talk about their day. And somehow I equated that with something I wanted to do with my life. And even when I read through my baby book, which my mom gave me a few years ago, she said from when I was super young that I enjoyed helping. And so I think we kind of come into life with certain desires and gifts and talents that when we honor them as we have awareness of them really can make our lives full of meaning and purpose. And that's one of the things I'm most grateful for is my career path really being aligned with what I like doing in the world. And I got to a place, Wendy, about 6 years ago, feeling in my own personal healing as well as with clients, what is beyond telling the story of what we have known to be true, rehashing the past so much. I started to feel like there needs to be something beyond that because I felt like I was creating some of those same situations, though I had so much self-awareness and many tools, as well as for my clients. And I started meditating around that time, about 6 years ago or so. And I remember asking in meditation about all of this. And I received in my mind's eye, kind of hearing in my head, the word Chiron, Chiron. And the only reference I had for Chiron had to do with Carl Jung and his work about the collective unconscious, and Chiron being the metaphysical wounded healer. And it wasn't very exciting, Wendy, when I heard that. I'm like, is that all you got, universe, Chiron? And it kind of wouldn't go away. Somehow Chiron kept coming up in my thoughts. And so finally I surrendered and started Googling everything I could find about Chiron. And it led me to really understand kind of this missing piece for me had to do around core wounding. And that's on a spectrum. Core wounding is on one end when there's abuse, trauma, repeated painful events that we live in our childhoods and tend to repeat in adult relationships and patterns with ourselves and others. And then on the other side of that spectrum is vulnerability. And this might be more of like an ouch, where you occasionally bump up against something that doesn't feel good, but on the whole, your life is going really well. And I think we fall along that spectrum. And to really understand what our main area is for us to learn to forgive ourselves for how we might have hurt ourselves or others, maybe not showing up for ourselves fully because we didn't believe we deserved to, or that we could, or that we're worthy. And I started to really kind of deep dive into what personal responsibility and healing have to do with each other in a different way than I had before. Understanding Chiron really exposing to us an area to love ourselves more deeply and have empathy towards versus judgment and criticism.
So it sounds like this intuitive hit you had around Chiron changed the trajectory of your practice.
It influenced it. It kind of like upgraded it. I see it more as like an upgrade because I've always loved being a therapist, and my dedication, it's to clients. I feel like it's family, friends, loved ones, and clients. It's such a sacred intimacy being a therapist and a practitioner, as you know.
Right.
And for this, it just kind of up leveled it. It like opened new doors of possibility. What is the life I want to live? What is the future I've been doing all this work to create? And looking ahead, besides just in my rearview mirror in the past, and helping clients to do that too. Like, you're doing all this emotional healing and work for what is in your mind's eye when you imagine waking up, kind of that miracle question, the life that you want to be living, and then who do you have to become to fulfill it? Because that's where it can get exciting. Like, who imagining, how does a New York Times bestselling author order their coffee in the morning, and really positioning yourself in your mind, like feeling into, I am in this experience that I most desire. How do I feel? And it really opens up in your own heart, in your own mind, ideas and inspired actions that then you want to take versus grinding things out so much. And it really kind of up leveled my practice more than dramatically changed it. It's like it was always there, just waiting for me to have the eyes to see. And that's what I really love helping clients with. Like, everything you want and need, it's all inside of your awareness, your consciousness. It's like, let's unobstruct what a part of you already knows is true for you and about you. And how do you need to support yourself then in your physical life to live that life with more ease? Might you need to delegate more? And that's where your Chiron placement comes into play. Say Chiron in the sign of Leo speaks to how you're really great at helping others achieve their success. You help them so well on their creative projects, but you need to ask for more help for yours. You might need to delegate some of the responsibilities so you have time for your passion project. And others don't know it unless you say and ask. So it's releasing the belief, I have to do it all on my own, and let others help you, hire help, even if you need to, so you can be creatively lit up. And that's where you find your deepest joy, as an example of how this plays out.
So you start exploring all things Chiron. How did you start introducing it into your practice, and how did you use it with people?
So I do that as needed. I really love approaching therapy and my clients with what brought you in, what's most important for you, because I feel like by really addressing that in the first session, people are leaving feeling a sense of relief, feeling a sense of, like just being heard and seen is the most important thing. So I might not introduce Chiron in the first session. I weave it in as it really appropriately serves that person.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because I want people to really feel validated and that this is meaningful for them. And at the right time, I'll be like, hey, let me look into this for you and share some insights. And then it's like they're able to connect with the material and use it for themselves. But I don't use like a cookie cutter every first session we talk about Chiron. It's like I weave it in.
Right. I wasn't assuming that. I was just assuming it was a part of your practice
Yeah.
at some
Yes.
point because it turned into a book. So I'm thinking that you must have had enough experiences experimenting with this concept in order to say, like, hey, there's something to this. I need to capture this in a book and share it with others.
Actually, I did it a bit differently from that.
Really?
I've
Okay.
learned as in incubating my ideas. So I actually really didn't use this in my work with others for several years. I researched and I wrote for almost 4 years. I really wanted to integrate psychology, spirituality, philosophy, and there's some science in there having to do with Dr. Fry, who discovered in the 80s that our emotional tears actually release three stress hormones that are only released through emotional tears. And I use that for sure to help some clients that had a hard time letting themselves cry, feeling like it wasn't helpful or it was a judgment about themselves around it. That no, this is actually releasing toxins. So I use little pieces like that along the way, but I really wanted to have the book more finished before I started asking some certain friends and even with myself. I love research and I love kind of having things super solid. And also, if you share an idea too soon, people might try to talk you out of it if it's not their dream. And so I've learned to incubate my dreams and like a baby until it's really ready to be birthed into the world, because that's where I've achieved my greatest success, is really waiting till it's solidly in place. And then actually after the book came out is when I really started to integrate it into my therapy practice.
That is fascinating.
How so?
You think about someone who is usually writing a book, it's because they've had all of this experience around this particular topic. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to share this with people. So you were really going on this idea that this is going to help people. So it seems
Yes.
very intuitive,
It was. It was into my
the whole
intuition led
process.
me, yes, to the resources, Wendy. And at that age, I started writing my book when I think I was 46. So I had had quite a lot of life experience that confirmed that this is it. This is where you need to spend some time researching. And in my personal journey, I lived all the 12 placements of Chiron, the core woundings of abandonment and neglect and not valuing your own creativity. I feel like during those several years that experiences came to my life, and had when I was younger as well, growing up with some rough experiences, that everything started to make sense through this
Mm.
Chiron lens of our wounds really birth within us this, to really be gentle and loving and forgiving and to self-reflect. I'm so sorry you went through that, Lisa. Really self-attuning to those wounds that I had kind of glossed over in some ways. So I really felt like I had those years to get a deep handle upon humanity's wounding and then how to heal it through empathy and self-forgiveness. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama endorsed my book because of that, which was such an honor to me and for me.
I could imagine, yeah. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to sort of define in a very specific way for people who aren't familiar with astrology or Carl Jung and the archetypes, what Chiron actually is. I mean, you've talked about it in examples, but
Yeah.
maybe it'd be helpful to sort of define what it is for somebody who has no idea what Chiron is all about.
Sure. So Chiron in astronomy is designated both as a minor planet and a comet that was discovered in the early 70s, and it has an odd elliptical orbit between the planets of Saturn and Uranus, and was named Chiron after the Greek centaur Chiron, who is half man, half horse. Chiron is the founder of medicine, of botany, of pharmacy, of the healing arts. And we have an experience with Chiron almost every day you drive by potentially this, but when we go to the doctor's office, the staff of medicine, the pole with the two snakes, Chiron gave that to Asclepius in Greek mythology. Chiron tutored Asclepius. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I've seen that staff of medicine forever. This was Chiron's staff that he gave. So it's kind of cool the way Chiron shows up uniquely in that particular way. And in astrology, Chiron is a placement, just like you might know your sun sign. Like, what's your sun sign? When somebody says, what's your sign? What do
I'm
you
a
say?
Leo.
You're a Leo. Okay. So Chiron is in Leo, in Aries, and Gemini. Chiron is in one of the 12 signs. It's just not often talked about in astrology because it has to do with our vulnerability and our wounding. And it's not super fun to talk about if you've ever gone for an astrological reading. And yet it holds this great importance where if you don't know where you're kind of afraid to tread, the parts of yourselves that you might hide, you might edit because you don't want people to judge you. And this might look like you're really successful, but like you feel insecure and you feel like you're always comparing yourselves to others. And who wants to say that about themselves? But it does affect your life because privately you're having these emotional experiences of feeling not good enough or unworthy. And that untreated can cause health problems, like anxiety can manifest in heart problems, heart issues. Depression can manifest as bodily injuries and malfunctioning. And so by really addressing our emotions, we also heal our bodies. And so it's helpful to know where you might feel ashamed and carry shame around versus, okay, look, so maybe this is an area of my life I'm not as developed as other areas. What tools do I need to get? And so my book explores the 12 placements of Chiron based on when you were born so that you can really get a handle on this area of your life. Is it just an ouch vulnerability, or is it like a deep wounding that's left you kind of destabilized emotionally?
In your book, you include a chart that lists the birth years and where Chiron would sit in your chart. So that's
Yes,
super handy for folks who are maybe, I've never had my natal chart read, so I have no idea. You include that information in your book.
I do. Yeah, as well as my youngest sibling is a computer coder. So we just found an amazing site on Chiron. So at nolatherapy.com/Chiron, it takes you right to a link. All that you do is enter your birth info, hit enter, boom, it gives you your Chiron right there. You don't have to look at a wheel, a chart. It just gives you Chiron is in blank. And so that's been really awesome and updated in the last few months, as well as the paper chart in the book, but you can also get it electronically super easily.
Beautiful. Okay. The importance of knowing where Chiron sits in your natal chart is that what you're saying is that it's revealing this deep wounding that you are bringing into this lifetime that's going to be showing up as a pattern
Exactly, as
until
patterns.
you address it and heal it.
Yes. Right. And again, it's on a spectrum. It's on like wounding, and that includes down to vulnerability. So not everyone is walking around with like huge gaping wounds. I want to make that clear. It's a spectrum of, is it like an ouch, like just every now and then something like, like gets on your nerves? Or is it like, wow, like I experienced sexual abuse and I'm like, there's some trauma there that needs healing, and how that might show up in adult sexual relationships or in friendships. So it's again, wherever you are on that spectrum, it is different for everyone.
Right. And the other thing you emphasize in your book is the importance of looking at each of the placements and that all of us can be affected by Chiron no matter where it is. I don't know if I'm wording that correctly.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying. And the way I look at that is, right now I'm 51. Certainly I have been and felt an abandonment. I have been rejected. So I think when you've lived a certain amount of life at some age, like you've experienced things that have hurt your feelings. And my book really addresses it. It's like I've picked up my book sometime when my feelings are hurt about something. Like, what did I say about feeling rejected? Because it can really help you as things come up in your lives, as they do sometime, to really self-soothe. And I give affirmations as well as really practical takeaway steps. I love practical wisdom. So things that you can start doing today in your life in your thoughts to really feel masterful at this. Like, I can do this. Because a predictor of success is believing that we can. Like, we really have to believe for ourselves for something to be effective. So I give super user friendly steps to take. So if it's even not your Chiron placement, but you feel hurt by something, you can have a guide of what can I do about this to feel better about myself.
So it sounds like it's a handy book just to have on the shelf to pull
It
out when
is.
you're having a particularly tough time.
It is. It is.
So it doesn't always have to be a powerfully deep wound.
Exactly. It can just be repetitive. And you mentioned the word pattern, which I talk about in my book. We live our lives based upon patterns. We're habitual beings. We enjoy a routine, the people, places, and things that we habituate each day. We call it a routine. I call it an orbit. And we're all like little planets in our own solar system that we have created. And when you look at yourself like that, we are orbit surrounding, we surround others, and we're orbit surrounded. People, places, and things orbit us. And when we want to create something better in our lives, when we want to talk about goal setting, we're at the beginning of the year, when we want to be on the path of achieving our dreams and goals, it requires often thinking something different, doing something different, changing a pattern. And so my book helps you look at your patterns to decide what's really working here and what would I like to change? What do I need to change? And often it's in the area of our thoughts. And our thoughts repetitively become our belief systems. And we can only go as far as our largest limiting belief. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I really want to believe in infinite possibilities for me. So what does it take for me to actually believe that's true? And for me, it came down to worthiness, where my Chiron placement in Aries pointed to this wounding and vulnerability in the area of my self-worth. And that was so true because I have a lot of professional and personal success, but I often would feel like it's not good enough or I'm not good enough. And when I kind of paused the achievement to really turn to myself within and say, Lisa, if you never do another thing, you're good enough. And I want you to be happy, enjoying your life some more, like doing less and being more. Go be with friends, go be with your pets, go take a trip. And it started to really change the way I felt about myself. And I started to believe so much better, so much more kindly towards myself and towards others, because what happens within you happens without you. Like, as above, so below, as within, so without. It's all reflective. And so I started being kinder, and like people in turn were kinder to me. So it's like this really exponentially expanding ripple effect into your life in some wonderful ways.
Yeah, I totally agree with this idea that everything begins with thought, and thoughts are wicked powerful, right?
Yes.
I'm a shamanic practitioner, and the foundation of my practice is in Hawaiian or Polynesian shamanism. And one of the main tenets of that philosophy I'm to understand is this statement, the world is what you think it is.
Mm.
So, like, how would you interpret that?
It's so true. I love hearing you say that, Wendy. The world is what you think it is. And we look at the world through the filters of our life experiences. And for some that have lived like really magnificent lives, growing up feeling really loved, you can have, do, and be anything. I think it'd be an easy filter to see life and the world as being a safe place, a kind place, a loving place that supports you. And for others that have had harder life experiences and even said the world is not safe, the world doesn't love you, the world is gonna, mess you up. Like, parents say this stuff. I grew up with some of those messages out loud being spoken. And I realized, like, that's not what I want to believe. Like, I believe the world, there are beautiful, kind people, and I intend to attract that. And so who do I have to become for my lens of life to really reflect a kind and loving world? And it started with being kinder to myself in my thoughts, like not beating up on myself for X, Y, and Z. And I think it's like that for many of us to really start. That's where the empathy and self-forgiveness pieces in my book came up. It really starts with how we talk to ourselves. in between our two ears, in our head, and really making that narrative more loving and kind. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I use the same language around filters. It's like your beliefs color your experience of reality, so they act as a filter. So you just gave some really good examples of how that works. The cool part is that thoughts and beliefs can be changed.
Yes.
The challenging part is that they can be changed. It's really, I mean, because if you think about a belief, by the time something's a belief, right, it's kind of deeply embedded in your unconscious, and you have to become aware of something that you're probably not completely aware of. And so, how do you address that with folks? How do you help them become aware of things that they may not be aware of, ways that they're seeing the world or themselves?
Sure. And I think there's evidence of that every day. If you, right now, even those of you listening, if you look at your life, the areas of your life and the areas that go well for you and easy, that's where you have some really wonderful beliefs about life and things for yourself. And then look at the areas where it feels more challenging. I think it becomes apparent then maybe, and I'll go to relationships because it's such a big issue that people come in to talk to me about love and romantic relationships. In my book, I walk you through some questions in the beginning of remembering experiences where you felt really loved, and then other times when you felt unloved, and what meaning you made that to be about yourself, that I'm unlovable, that I'm not worthy, or that love is a lot of work. It's performance. I have to really, when somebody gives to me, I might feel like I need to reciprocate quickly, or if they don't feel like I appreciate them, they might go away. To really look at your experiences, and your emotions are that guidance that reveal to you what you're believing. And underlying all of this is that we are so loved. We are so loved by the universe, by source, so it's like it's rigged in our favor is another way of saying that. And it took me a while to actually believe that, but I wanted to believe that. Like, what if I lived in a world that was looking out for me? Like, maybe I can kind of like not be so tense and tight and worried. Like, maybe I can really trust that there are good things that want me as well. And so you start to kind of play. I see this as like play, like playing with your beliefs. Try for 7 days to believe as if things are going to work out for me and see what happens. I do like 30-day experiments with myself, with my beliefs, and it always manifests as better things. So I encourage you to do a 30-day experiment with something you want to believe is true for you and see what happens. And then your beliefs start to become a lot easier to change.
Yeah, it definitely requires a little elbow grease, huh?
A little, but I think it can be more joyous, than painful or hard. It's like, speak the intention. I want to see my life go easier. And then notice what songs come on the radio, who you run into at the grocery. Again, the world is designed to help you. So if you can kind of state the intention and let it go and just try to feel as at peace as you can, and just notice who calls you, notice who texts. I promise you're going to hear from someone you haven't heard from that's going to start bringing to you the things that you've really most deeply desired.
For someone who's just starting out exploring this territory that can be painful for some folks, is that even starting experimenting maybe with one day, just because let's say they don't have an immediate positive experience, then they might give up.
Right.
And so the idea of, all right, so how do you sort of wade into this in a way that feels accessible? Yeah, like suppose somebody, for example, has a belief that they don't deserve good things in their life.
Right.
And so their lens is going to be colored by that belief, and they're going to interpret all of the things that are happening to them. Well, all right, so that good thing happened, but maybe it's a fluke. I don't
Right.
deserve that.
And so I love what you're saying. And I say yes to making the time frame of your personal experiment feel manageable for you. And a bridging statement to go from feeling like I'm worthy and deserving, to just wake up and say, I'm worthy, I'm deserving, like doesn't fit because that's not what you believe. So a better statement is, I want to believe. that I'm actually worthy of good things. Nobody ever told me that. So this is like really out of my wheelhouse, but I want to believe I'm deserving, that I'm lovable. I want to believe, just show me, so you start there with kind of an ask, show me, and then just notice.
What if I'm deserving?
What? I love that. Yes. What if? Because I'd really like to know that for myself in ways that make sense to me.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Thank you for bringing that nuance out.
I want to shift into forgiveness. I think that that's such a powerful concept, and it also is tricky territory. I'd be curious to know what your approach is around forgiveness. Like you talk about self-forgiveness. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's tricky because there's so much about it. Is that what you mean when you said that, Wendy? There's so much out there about forgiveness and
Well, it's not easy. I think it's like you can use the words, you can say the words, I forgive myself, but then do you really?
yeah. And I think exactly that is why forgiveness is so tricky. Well, I think it's because first and foremost, I know I was taught, and I feel like a lot of others as well, that forgiveness is for others. Forgiveness is for someone else. Someone hurts you and you're just supposed to forgive because that's the right thing to do. That's what we do here. That's what you're supposed to do. But there's no traction there because, like you said, we're not taught how to forgive or what that even means. And so I write in my book about forgiveness being progressive, that it's a progressive kind of action thought that you kind of wade into, like you're walking into a pool, starting in the shallow end and going deeper as it feels authentic and you're able. And I think first and foremost to start with forgiveness for yourself. Before you can give someone something, you have to have the experience of it, so to speak. So I think it's really introducing loving kindness to yourself in the ways that noticing your thought patterns, and when you do something that you feel like you shouldn't do, how do you handle that? Are you beating yourself up, saying curse words in your head about yourself? And or are you like, hey, it's okay, like there's going to be another chance, and see where you are in that spectrum and start to really get clear about that, because how you speak to yourself and forgive yourself is typically how you do that or not with others. So it really starts with self-reflection. And then once you start to feel like you can let yourself off the hook for some things, I think naturally people and things start coming to mind that you want to start releasing as well.
So it's really, I mean, everything you've been talking about in this conversation so far, it's really introspection heavy. Like you have to really be
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to your interior experience.
Yeah. Yes.
And the other thing that I wanted to touch on before we sign off for the day is trust,
Mm.
because that's a big part. You actually mentioned it a little bit ago, and I wanted to come back to it. What are your thoughts or theories around trust?
Can you say a little more about trust in the way that you're approaching it right
Yeah,
now?
like how do you know when you can trust?
Mm. Wow, that's such a good question.
It's one I like
So
to
I can,
ask.
it's good, Wendy. In my own experience, I see trust as well as being such an inside job, because I've had the awareness in my own personal development that there were times in my life I don't think I really trusted myself. And there was some fear around um, living my life and certain places to go or not go. And I talk in my book about recovering from a drug addiction. And that was the area for me where I felt like it was hard to trust myself. Like, can I go certain places and not use drugs? And I learned in my healing journey, it was changing my people, places, and things to where, as much as I know that's not going to be an issue or an option. And as I've been more committed in the last 10 years to my recovery and sustained like freedom from drug use, that doesn't even come my way. Like, it's not even like the universe, it's so vibrated out of my experience that it's I don't fear that anymore. So I had to learn to trust myself, to take care of myself, and even in relationships, that I have the skills to handle. So these are some things you can say to yourself to help you trust your own judgment. And once you're in this personal develop journey and personal transformation journey to really know that you have the skills to handle whatever comes up. And I think that's a process to know that whatever comes up, I'm going to be able to handle this. So I think trust really comes from that place of within oneself versus placing trust outside of myself in other people. Because that's how I was taught. That's what I did and was let down. That, when we can really trust ourselves, we're attracting trustworthy people that are aligned, that are aware, that are, in their own personal development and like able to, when they mess up, be like, I'm so sorry. I own that. I take responsibility for that. So as you're able to do that for yourself, again, your life naturally has those people surrounding you that are self-responsible as well. What have you found about that?
I agree. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like they talk about how trust has to be earned. And I think that's the case for self-trust as well as trust in the world. It's like when you want to trust something or
Mm-hmm.
someone, you're kind of starting out at first with your fingers crossed, like, I hope. My
Right.
hope is that this will work out the way you want it to. And then you have to take a risk into that
Right.
territory. So stepping into an environment that is potentially triggering, like when you have a history of addiction, and hoping that you will have the strength to be able to get through that without using.
And for me, I would say no to even going into that environment. Like for me now, it's like using your intuition. Our intuition is always speaking to us about things in advance of their happening. And you have a gut sense, you have a gut inner knowing. And we were trained as children to turn away from it. Like when kids on the playground, you might not want to play with someone, and a parent's like, oh my God, go play with so and so. They're nice, but something in you. So I would say no to that. Like, you can really get such a good read on life that you're not even venturing into those really muddy, muddled, scary places where it's like, where to go and who to be with. It's not even a question. And so I say that's like the possibility.
So was it always easy for you to access that knowing, that intuitive knowing?
When I look back, my intuition has always been sharp, loud, and with me. But again, I listened to the training and teachings of parents and others around me that, you should be this way, you need to fit in, you need all these things that all of us have grown up with. I think, especially in America, versus honoring our intuition, honoring that voice that every day, and any of you listening, just look at your day and you kind of gut feelings. Your body gives you signals about what to do and what not to do, and to start listening, to really honor. I see it as honoring ourselves, honoring our intuition. And it doesn't mean we're loudly protesting no to this and no to that. It's like a quietness. Like you just know because your mind's like, I feel like going here today. I think I'm not going to go to that party. And I'm going to do this instead. So it's actually very quiet, easy, kind of listening to yourself and acting accordingly and making plans that way. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
no, I think that possibility is there for every single one of us to tap into that intuitive knowing. Sometimes I think it can be a little challenging because someone might have a lot of internal noise, a lot of negative thoughts or emotional stuff that's getting in the way of them actually picking up on that. So then it's like that's what I was kind of getting to around the trust piece is in the absence of that intuitive knowing, you're sort of stepping into something hoping that you'll get through it okay. And then once you do get through it okay, and you see that, oh, wow, I survived that, then you have like one little notch on your trust belt and you can move forward and take another risk. And then over time, you've experienced enough to tell you that you can trust yourself.
I hear you. And I think what can help you with trust is self soothing. As you were just speaking that scenario, what really helps you trust yourself is when you're anxious, ask yourself, why am I anxious? What am I fearing right now? What am I thinking could happen? And then to self soothe. And you don't have to go do things that scare the shit out of you. Like that would be a no, to me. It'd be like, what do I need right now? And to soothe that it doesn't have to be like you're stepping on potential landmines. I think that's like an old paradigm of living versus like what helps me feel safe each day? Like, what practices? Is it exercise? Is it meditation? Is it reading something affirming? Is it, going to my practitioner for healing? Is it, like all the tools that we have access to? And especially in this information rich age, there's so much that's accessible through your computer, through your phone, with apps, and just really gently moving forward, not freaking yourself out and feeling like I survived that, so to speak, like really learning to self-soothe. And then that helps you trust that I've got this. So I would encourage, don't venture into the super scary places. That would be like your intuition saying this isn't for me, potentially.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I wasn't talking about super scary places. I was just talking about something that is hard.
Yeah, and I would say maybe don't do that yet. What's the baby step? What's the baby step to that hard thing is where I would approach it personally.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I definitely have, I guess, a more shamanic, that more, let's step into the fear like a warrior.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I hear you. And that works for some people. Absolutely, yes. Yes.
All right. So I am aware of the time. How do people get a hold of you and your book?
Thank you, Wendy. I would love for people to, anywhere you order books, be it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or even your favorite local bookstore. If you go in and tell them my name, Lisa Tahir, or my book, The Chiron Effect, and it's a big title, so it might be easier to just Google my name, Lisa Tahir. My website is nolatherapy.com. It stands for New Orleans, Los Angeles Therapy.com. I love supporting local bookstores, so I'm an advocate. If you have one you love, they can order it since I'm published by a publishing house, or Amazon, the normal venues. Even Walmart.com has it. I was so surprised, and it was kind of cool to see that you can buy my book that way. So it's everywhere. And I'd love to help you if your listeners, Wendy, want a session. I'm happy to do half off my standard fee for a new person if they mention you or Lucid Cafe podcast. I'm happy to offer that to your
Oh, that's
community.
very nice. I didn't realize you worked with folks from outside of the states that you are working in.
I do. I've been a life coach as well for a number of years. So it's kind of under that life coaching umbrella.
Gotcha. Okay. And you also have a podcast.
I do. It's called All Things Therapy, and it's almost 7th year, and I talk about things like this.
Beautiful.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate your time and your really good questions. You got me thinking. I really appreciate that, Wendy.
All righty. There you have it. If you'd like to learn more about Lisa and her work or get a copy of The Chiron Effect, please visit her website, nolatherapy.com. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today at the Lucid Cafe. I did not mean to make that rhyme. Until next time.